Have you noticed a quiet, persistent feeling that something in your life no longer fits, even though nothing obvious has gone wrong? A subtle restlessness that follows you into moments of silence, a sense that you are standing on the edge of something unnamed, unseen, yet undeniable. Many people ignore this feeling or explain it away. But if you are here now, reading or listening to these words, that discomfort is not random. It is not a weakness. It is not confusion. It is a form of intelligence that operates beneath logic, a sensitivity that works in the shadows long before the mind can put language to it. This moment is not an accident. From a Jungian perspective, there are times when the inner world and the outer world quietly synchronize, creating what Carl Jung called synchronicity. These are not coincidences, but meaningful alignments. They appear when the psyche is ready to shift, when an old internal structure can no longer contain what is trying to emerge. Long before the conscious mind understands, the soul begins to move. It whispers through curiosity, through dissatisfaction, through a strange pull toward ideas, conversations, or messages that seem to find you rather than the other way around. You may have told yourself that you are simply tired, bored, or going through a phase. Yet beneath those explanations lives a deeper truth. The psyche withdraws energy from what no longer reflects who you are becoming. What feels like restlessness is actually guidance. What feels like impatience is often readiness. Jung believed that the unconscious always moves ahead of conscious awareness, preparing the ground before the ego knows what is happening. Your interest in this moment is not casual. It is the psyche nudging you toward a threshold you were always meant to cross. For people with heightened sensitivity, this process often begins quietly. You sense shifts before they happen. You feel misalignment before it becomes visible. You notice emotional undercurrents that others dismiss. This sensitivity is not fragility. It is a deep perceptual ability, a way of reading life from the inside out. It allows you to detect when a chapter is ending, even if the world around you insists everything should stay the same. When that sensitivity awakens, the familiar can start to feel strangely hollow, and what once satisfied you may suddenly lose its meaning. This is why moments like this matter. They do not arrive during comfort. They arrive when the psyche is preparing for reorganization. Jung understood that major psychological turning points are preceded by signals, not instructions. You are not handed a clear map. You are given a feeling, a pull, a sense that something within you has already begun to loosen its grip on the old life. That is why ignoring it becomes increasingly difficult. So here is the question most people never ask themselves. What if the unease you have been trying to silence is not a problem to solve, but a signal that your life is about to realign? What if the reason this message found you now is that something inside you is ready to change, whether your conscious mind feels prepared or not? This is not the beginning of chaos. It is the beginning of clarity. You are not lost. You are standing at the edge of a comeback that started long before you realized it. There comes a strange moment in life when everything that once brought you joy begins to taste like ash. You go to the same job, speak to the same people, follow the same routines, but something invisible has shifted. You sit across from a partner or friend you once loved deeply, and though their face hasn't changed, you feel like a stranger in the room. You try to return to an old passion, maybe painting or running or reading, and where there used to be fire, there is only smoke. You wonder quietly, what's wrong with me? But what if nothing is wrong? What if this disconnection is not a breakdown, but a breakthrough in disguise? Carl Jung believed that the psyche begins to withdraw its energy when a part of your identity no longer reflects your true self. This withdrawal doesn't happen overnight. It begins with boredom, then comes irritation, then a quiet emotional death that others cannot see. You start waking up tired even after 8 hours of sleep. Conversations feel draining, social gatherings feel fake, even rest doesn't feel like rest anymore. What you're experiencing is not laziness, it is your soul pulling away from the roles, routines, and relationships that no longer align with your inner truth. At this point in life, often around midlife or after a major emotional event, you begin to realize that what sustained you before was built on a version of you that no longer exists. The person who once wanted to climb the corporate ladder, keep the peace at any cost, stay in a relationship for security, or prove themselves through achievement is dissolving. And with that dissolution comes a deep spiritual discomfort. Most people panic at this stage. They either force themselves back into old shapes or label themselves broken. But what if you're not broken at all? What if you are simply outgrowing an outdated version of yourself? Jung called this stage the beginning of individuation, the psychological process of becoming whole. Before you can truly become who you are meant to be, you must shed who you learned to be. This means confronting the illusion that safety comes from sameness. It means facing the grief of losing identities that once defined you. The job title, the loyal friend, the perfect parent, the good daughter. These masks may have served you, but they are not you. And the soul knows this. That's why your energy has begun to retreat. Think of it this way. If your psyche were a garden, it would stop watering flowers that no longer bloom. Not because they are bad, but because your season has changed. The trouble is, no one teaches us how to grieve what we've outgrown. No one tells you that losing interest is often a sacred invitation, so instead, people feel ashamed. They stay in places that drain them. They force love where love no longer flows. They blame themselves for a natural shift that is asking them to go inward and ask deeper questions. Have you noticed how everything external starts to feel fake when your inner world begins to awaken? How can you can't stand small talk anymore? How does your body tense at things you once tolerated with ease? These aren't random reactions, they are messages, signals from your unconscious that your old self is no longer running the show. Something deeper has taken the wheel, something real. So ask yourself, what if your exhaustion is sacred? What if your disconnection is not failure, but the first sign of alignment? What if the things you can no longer tolerate are not obstacles, but teachers guiding you back to your truth? Comment below if you've felt this shift. Tell us, what part of your life feels hollow, even though it once felt right? What are you no longer willing to pretend about? This is not the end. It is the inner beginning. The soul always speaks first through discomfort. Listen. At first, it feels like confusion. Then it becomes guilt. You look around at the life you've built, perhaps a stable job, a long-term relationship, a daily routine that others would envy, and yet a dull ache keeps echoing beneath it all. Everything makes sense on paper, but something inside feels quietly suffocated. You don't understand why you're restless. Why does the praise no longer excite you? Why do you walk through each day like a well-trained actor, reciting lines that no longer move you? What if the real problem isn't that you've failed to become someone, but that you've succeeded too well at becoming someone you're not? Most people assume suffering comes from falling short. But what if the deeper ache comes from fitting in too perfectly with what was never meant for your soul? Think back. How much of what you call your personality was shaped in response to what your family rewarded, what society accepted, or what your early wounds demanded for survival? Maybe you were the responsible one who never caused trouble, the peacemaker who held the family together, the achiever who collected degrees to prove your worth. These weren't just habits, they were masks, roles carved from fear, not freedom. Somewhere along the way, those roles hardened into an identity. And now, years later, you don't know who you are without them. Carl Jung warned that adaptation without consciousness leads to a life of inner betrayal. He called it identification with the persona, when you confuse your mask with your soul. At first, this persona helps you function. It gets you approval, love, and safety. But eventually, it becomes a prison. You start feeling like a stranger in your own body. You laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You agree to things your spirit quietly resents. You stay in conversations, jobs, marriages, even cities, not because they nourish you, but because they affirm the image you've spent your whole life upholding. And if you're honest, that image is exhausted. Here's the paradox. The more successfully you play the role, the more invisible your true self becomes. The world praises your reliability while your inner world quietly decays. You become known for the very things that drain you: a dependable worker, a selfless parent, a loyal partner. But who are you outside of those scripts? What do you desire that your old self was too afraid to ask for? Let's take a real-life example. Imagine the woman who raised 3 children, stayed in the marriage, volunteered at every school function, and kept the household spotless. Everyone sees her as devoted and selfless. But now, the kids are grown. The house is silent. And in the quiet, she realizes she never learned how to say what she wants. Her whole identity was shaped around being needed. Now that no one needs her, she feels empty, not because she failed, but because she succeeded too well at erasing herself, or the man who worked 20 years climbing the ladder, only to hit midlife with a panic attack in his corner office. The success didn't fulfill him, it buried him. Under the image of a provider, a leader, a man in control, lived a soul that longed for creativity, slowness, wonder. But that part of him never had permission to live. These aren't personal failures. These are collective patterns. Most people never stop to ask, what if the pain I feel is not because I'm broken, but because I've outgrown the costume I mistook for my skin? What if the soul begins to whisper not when you are weak, but precisely when you are strong enough to stop pretending? Jung believed that the true self is never lost. It is only hidden beneath layers of adaptation. The rupture you feel right now is not your end. It is your soul knocking on the walls you built to survive. So ask yourself honestly, where in your life have you succeeded at fitting in, but failed to feel alive? What are you ready to stop performing? And who might you become when you finally stop playing a role? Share in the comments. What part of your identity do you feel secretly tired of performing? What mask are you ready to let fall? Your comeback begins the moment you stop rehearsing and start remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. There comes a moment when forward movement stops and life seems to pull you inward instead. You may try to stay productive, positive, or composed, but something inside refuses to cooperate. Here is the unsettling question most people never consider. What if this downward pull is not a setback at all, but the exact doorway your soul has been waiting for? Carl Jung called this phase the nekia, the descent into the unconscious. It is the part of the transformation no one celebrates because it looks like a loss from the outside. You may feel more tired than usual, less motivated, and strangely emotional for no clear reason. Old memories surface without invitation. Songs from another lifetime make you cry in your car. Anger appears where numbness once lived. Loneliness shows up even when your calendar is full. This is not a weakness. This is the psyche reclaiming what was pushed aside so you could survive. In real life, this descent often begins quietly. A woman in her 40s who spent decades being the strong one suddenly finds herself unable to hold it together. She has done everything right. She built a career, raised children, and kept promises. Yet now, she cannot ignore the grief she never had time to feel. She wonders why she feels empty when she should feel accomplished. The answer is not that she is broken, it is that her inner world is finally asking for honesty instead of endurance. Or consider the man who spent years numbing himself with work, routine, or constant distraction. When the distractions fall away, maybe after a job loss, a divorce, or even retirement, he is flooded with emotions he never learned how to name. Regret, rage, longing, dreams he abandoned to be practical. This sudden emotional intensity feels frightening, so he assumes something is wrong. But Jung would say something is finally right. The unconscious has been given space to speak. The descent feels unbearable because it dismantles the illusion of control. The false self you built to function in the world begins to crack. The part of you that always knew what to do, how to behave, how to be acceptable, can no longer carry the weight. And when that happens, everything you buried to keep going demands attention. Grief for the childhood you did not get, anger at boundaries you never set, sadness for talents you abandoned to fit in. These emotions are not enemies, they are messages. This is why the descent often coincides with exhaustion. You stop caring about impressing people. Small talk feels unbearable. Your tolerance for meaningless obligations disappears. It can feel like depression, but it is not the same. Depression collapses inward without direction. The descent, painful as it is, has intention. It is guiding you toward the truth. The psyche is withdrawing energy from what no longer serves you so it can be invested where your life actually wants to grow. Jung believed that light is born from darkness, not despite it. In the underworld of your psyche, you recover parts of yourself that were buried to keep the peace. The sensitive child who learned to toughen up, the curious soul who was told to be realistic, the intuitive voice you silenced to avoid conflict, these parts did not die. They waited. And now, as uncomfortable as it feels, they are returning. This is why the descent cannot be avoided. If you try to bypass it, the psyche will repeat it through anxiety, burnout, or crisis. But if you allow it, something remarkable happens. The chaos begins to organize itself. Insights appear in moments of stillness. You start to see patterns in your life that once felt random. You understand why certain relationships drained you, why certain paths never fit, and why success never satisfied you. What felt like falling apart reveals itself as falling inward. So ask yourself this, honestly and without judgment. What emotions have you been postponing because you thought you had no time to feel them? What parts of yourself did you abandon to become who others needed you to be? And what if this dark passage is not here to destroy you, but to return you to yourself? If this resonates, share in the comments what has been surfacing for you lately. The emotion, the memory, the restlessness. You are not alone in this descent. And more importantly, you are not lost. You are on your way back. One morning you wake up and something has shifted. It's not just fatigue. It's not just stress. It's something deeper, more disorienting. You no longer recognize the person you've been performing as for years. You don't want to check your email. You don't want to show up as the dependable one. You don't even want to pretend to be fine anymore. What happens when the version of you that everyone depended on simply retires without notice. Here's the strange question no one ever asks. What if your exhaustion is not a dysfunction, but your soul's way of resigning from the job it never applied for? Carl Jung believed that when the persona, the social mask we wear, becomes too rigid, the psyche itself rebels. The life you built out of survival, approval, or expectation begins to collapse under its own weight. It's not burnout from doing too much. It's burnout from doing the wrong things for too long. This collapse is not sabotage. It is sacred disobedience. The inner self can no longer maintain a life that betrays its truth. You may have seen this happen to someone close to you. The high-functioning mother who finally screams in the car after years of smiling at PTA meetings. The successful executive who begins to cry without warning during lunch breaks. The loyal partner who suddenly walks away from a 20-year marriage, not because of someone else, but because of something forgotten inside themselves. From the outside, it looks like they snapped, but from within, something deeper has finally broken free. This collapse is often mistaken for failure, but Jung saw it as initiation. He taught that when the old structure falls, it clears space for individuation, the process of becoming your true self. Yet this is not a graceful process. It often looks like a mess, silence, withdrawal, or chaos. You forget who you thought you were. You no longer know how to introduce yourself at parties. You start questioning the purpose behind every daily task. The old motivations, pleasing others, achieving success, avoiding disapproval, no longer light any fire inside you. And still, most people will try to fix you. Get back to normal. You just need a vacation. But what if it's not that you need rest? Is it that your old life needs a funeral? Jung warned that when we identify too tightly with our roles, we become strangers to our own souls. He said that the unconscious will create disturbances until the conscious self pays attention. That disturbance can be a panic attack, a physical illness, or a sudden inability to tolerate surface-level conversations. The body and mind are not separate from the psyche. They act as messengers, and when the message is ignored, the volume increases. So ask yourself, what part of you is tired of pretending? What routine feels like a slow betrayal every time you repeat it? What belief about who you should be is quietly killing the parts of you that long to live? There is no shame in collapse. The shame is in abandoning yourself to avoid it. If your life is falling apart, perhaps it's not destruction at all, but revelation. Perhaps your psyche is no longer willing to be a supporting actor in someone else's script. Maybe this is the exact moment where the curtain falls on your false self and the real you begins to speak. In the comments, tell me, have you ever felt like the person you used to be just walked out quietly one day and never came back? What made that old version of you collapse? And what is rising now in its place? At first, it happens quietly. A hesitation before saying yes. A strange discomfort in conversations where you used to perform effortlessly. A feeling of dissonance when someone praises you for being so easygoing, loyal, or selfless. You nod along, but something inside you tightens, because deep down, you know the version of you they're admiring is the version you've had to betray yourself to maintain. But here's the haunting question. What if most of your relationships only exist because you agreed to abandon your real self? It's a brutal realization that many people don't dare voice. We learn to shapeshift early. We become the quiet one so the household doesn't explode. We become the helper so others don't leave. We become the achiever so we don't feel invisible. These choices are unconscious at first, survival strategies masquerading as personality traits. But one day, usually around midlife, those masks grow heavier than we can carry. and something inside says, enough. Carl Jung called this moment the rupture of the false self. He believed that much of our suffering stems from an unconscious agreement we made in childhood. If I become who they need me to be, I'll be loved. This is the invisible contract, and we carry it for decades into our marriages, our careers, our friendships. We abandon our real opinions to keep the peace. We say yes when our soul is screaming no. We laugh at things that hurt us just to be included, and then we wonder why we feel empty, lost, or quietly enraged. Take a real-life example. A woman in her 40s, always the peacemaker in her family, suddenly finds herself unable to attend Sunday dinners. Not because she's busy, but because her body starts to shake on the drive over. For years, she tolerated the veiled insults, the passive-aggressive remarks, the role of emotional sponge. But now, she feels physically sick in environments where she's not allowed to be real. The moment she says, "I can't do this anymore," the family lashes out. "You've changed. You're being selfish." But she knows something deeper. She's not becoming selfish. She's finally refusing to betray herself. Or the man who's been in a decades-long marriage where his needs have been silenced for peace. He's always smiled through the criticisms, played the provider role, and kept quiet to avoid confrontation. But one day, he can't ignore the panic that grips him when he walks through the front door. Not because his partner is cruel, but because he has no space left to exist. When he begins to speak up, to express anger, to set boundaries, the response is, "You're not the man I married." And he realizes, they're right. That man was a carefully constructed mask. The real him is just now being born. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of shedding the false self to become whole. But here's what no one tells you. Individuation is not peaceful. It's disruptive. It will cost you approval. It will threaten the stability of relationships built on your silence. It will make you question everything you thought was love. But it will also return your life to you. So, let me ask you this. Where in your life are you still paying for belonging with pieces of your soul? Who in your world only loves the version of you that agrees, conforms, and stays small? And what would happen if you stopped playing the role? This is not a surface-level shift. It is a sacred rebellion. The moment you stop betraying yourself, you stop performing. You stop seeking peace at the cost of your own inner war. And yes, people will say you've changed. They'll be uncomfortable. But they're right. You've changed because you are no longer available for the lie. Drop a comment below. Was there a moment when you realized you couldn't keep betraying yourself just to be loved? What happened when you finally said no? And what truth rose in its place? Not every victory looks like a celebration. Sometimes it looks like silence, like walking away from chaos without explanation, like sitting alone in your living room without feeling lonely for the first time in years. After all the noise of falling apart, breaking down, and rebuilding, the most shocking realization may be this. Peace feels unfamiliar at first. For many people over 35, especially those who have spent their lives pleasing, performing, and pretending, true peace can feel like a void. They ask, is this it? Not because they're disappointed, but because they've never lived without internal conflict. Carl Jung called this final integration the emergence of the self. It is not a destination, but a center you live from. A psychic home within you that no longer shapeshifts to survive. From this place, you no longer run your life through the filter of what others expect. You do not perform healing for applause, nor do you seek transformation to prove your worth. You return to what was always there beneath the adaptation, your quiet, unshakable knowing. This return is not loud. It is not something you post about or ask anyone to understand. It is subtle, yet seismic. It might look like cleaning out your house and realizing most of what you owned belonged to your old self. It might be choosing stillness instead of reactivity when someone tries to provoke your former wounds. It might be losing the urge to explain your choices because your alignment speaks for itself. You no longer need the world to mirror back your transformation. You have become the mirror. This center is where individuation lives. And what does it mean to truly live from your center? It means your yes is real because your no is now sacred. It means the relationships you keep are no longer based on guilt, duty, or fear, but on soul-level resonance. It means you feel what you feel without asking whether it's valid. You trust the signals of your body. You act before the mind overanalyzes. You rest without shame. You create without needing it to go viral. You finally understand that presence is enough. One woman, after decades of adapting to roles, daughter, wife, mother, employee, told me that her real comeback began when she stopped striving. She didn't launch a business or publish a memoir. She just started listening. She sat with her inner child every morning. She apologized to the parts of her she had ignored. And then she stopped apologizing to the world for being quiet, for being slow, for being her. That was her homecoming, and no one else needed to applaud it. So what if your greatest comeback was not about becoming someone impressive, but about returning to someone free? What if the most profound victory was never external, but the simple act of being fully in your own body, with your own voice, walking your own path, without explanation or apology? This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a different kind of life, one not driven by pain, performance, or projection, but rooted in clarity, presence, and inner truth. You are no longer surviving. You are no longer proving. You are simply being. And that, in a world that profits from your confusion, is the most radical transformation of all. So take a breath. Look around. You made it. Not back to who you used to be, but home to who you truly are. And from here, everything that unfolds will reflect your wholeness, not your wounds. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.